What's going on YouTube? This is SG1 Sports and you're watching our college football channel. I told you guys last week the schedule, it just wasn't great. It looked like a quiet weekend, no real big games, and I said that usually when we get those weeks, we get some upsets, we get some surprises, and that's exactly what we got in week 3. I definitely was surprised by many of the outcomes last week. Things didn't go the way I thought they would, but we're going to have an updated top 25 here. And we'll start at the bottom. So this is 21 through 25. So I want to, before I get into these teams, let's talk about Kansas State, Missouri, and let's talk about Tennessee and Florida. I don't know what to make of those 4 teams at this point. They might all be top 25 teams. They might not be top 25 teams. And I'm just having a really hard time figuring out if I should rank those teams or not. I feel more comfortable with these teams that you see on your screen right now. I'm more confident that these teams are good football teams. Those teams I just mentioned, I think might be, but it's early in the season and we just don't have a lot to go off of. I really thought Tennessee looked really good, but then maybe that was just Virginia. Maybe Virginia is that bad because Tennessee did not look great against Florida. Maybe Florida's a top 25 team and they just played awful against Utah. I mean, it's hard to really say for sure. But these teams I feel really confident in. Iowa at 3-0. The offense finally has some life. Scored over 40 points this weekend. The defense is still really good. They've done enough. They haven't really beaten anyone great, but they've showed me enough for me to put them in the top 25. And for Texas A&M, it's kind of the same situation with Texas A&M and Miami. Are these two teams both top 25 teams, or are they both teams that just aren't great, not top 25 teams? Based off of what I seen so far, just evaluating these teams, I believe Miami and Texas A&M are good teams. I may be proven wrong in the next couple of weeks, but again, based off what I've seen, I feel better about those two teams than I do in the teams that I did not rank. UCLA, Washington State still cruising there at 3-0. Resume. So we're at the point now where I'm ranking the teams based off of how good I think they are, based off of what I have seen this year and this year alone, not looking at the names on the jerseys or anything like that. But when it's close, that's when you can start to go by resume. So Washington State, UCLA both have looked good, very similar. Washington State has a better win. They've got the win over Wisconsin. That's why I have them one spot ahead of UCLA. It's as simple as that. Tulane at 21. Not just the fact that Ole Miss is looking pretty good and you lost to them in a game that you had to lead in the second half without your starting quarterback, but also the South Alabama win now looks really good. They blew them out. South Alabama just actually blew out Oklahoma State. So that win looks better for Tulane. I believe Tulane should be ranked. I don't think they should be penalized for playing Ole Miss. 16 through 20. So there's Miami. Again, I believe Miami and Texas A&M are good football teams. I think they're going to prove that over the next couple of weeks. Based off what I've seen, again, it's hard to judge these teams from the cupcake games. I mean, you just don't know. But I do believe, based off of what I've seen, that those are good football teams. Colorado, number 19. We're going to find out. We're going to find out about Colorado the next 2 weeks. Oregon and USC. Not just can they beat them, can they compete? Will those games even be competitive? Or will they get blown out and this story will kind of end? But right now they're 3-0, survived a scare from Colorado State. Just again, surprises this week. That was one of them. Even though they won, it was still surprising that it was that close. Oregon State, Oregon State and Duke, pretty similar teams. Duke has the better resume. They've got the win over Clemson. That's why Duke is ahead of Oregon State. I've got Alabama at 16. I don't know what to do with them. Based off of that South Florida performance, they really didn't look like a top 25 team at all. But you have to go back to the Texas game. I believe Texas is a really good team. They had a lead in the second half in that game. Texas pulled away late, but still Alabama was very competitive in that game. I think if they go back to Milroe, this team can still have a pretty good season. Now, they're not going to be a playoff team. I don't believe that. But what they went with Saturday quarterback, those two options, it's just not going to work. I think you've got to go back to Milroe because of what he can do with his legs. The offensive line's really struggling, but he is so athletic that he can get away from pressure, can scramble, and do kind of what the South Florida quarterback did against Alabama, which they never did, punch it in the end zone, but still moved the ball because of the quarterback and his legs. And I think that's what Alabama has to do if they're going to save this season. I don't think they'll beat Ole Miss without Jalen Milroe at quarterback. With him in there, they've got a shot. But I've dropped them to 16 just because I've seen some good from them, but seen some bad as well. All right, 11 through 15. North Carolina, nice win over Minnesota. And, they've actually been able to overcome some interceptions from Drake May, as well as he has played. He has turned the ball over this year, and they've still, even going back to South Carolina and this week, they've still been able to win these games and win those two games pretty comfortably. I know you got the App State game in there, but they just struggle them for whatever reason. But there's enough there. Resume-wise, North Carolina has a pretty good resume. 2 wins over Power 5 teams, then App State, a good Group of 5 team. Tar Heels up to 15. Number 14 is Ole Miss. They've also got a pretty good resume. A win over a top 25 Tulane team. Now a win over a Power 5 team in Georgia Tech. Rebels looking good. There's Oregon and Utah at 12 and 13. Utah had the great win against Florida. That win looks even better now. Oregon has the win over Texas Tech, a road win. So those teams pretty close for me right now. LSU up to number 11, dominated against Mississippi State. And, I do go back to the Florida State game. A lot of people are going to come away from that game and say LSU got killed, but they got dominated. But look at the first half. LSU looked like the better team in that first half. So it's not like from start to finish they looked like Florida State was a lot better than them. They just had a bad half of football, and they've shown what they can do when they put it together. Very impressed with their win over Mississippi State. Just absolutely dominated that game. And the Tigers, I think, could be on their way back up towards the top if they continue to play like that. We've got 10 Oklahoma. Very impressive so far. SMU, their best win. That's a pretty good team, though, and they've been absolutely dominating. I've got the Sooners up into the top 10 now. Ohio State, I think they might have found something this week. And perfect timing right before you play Notre Dame. But that offense finally looked like Ohio State's offense is supposed to look. They were explosive, hit some big plays in the air, on the ground. Defense has been solid all year. I think that I feel better about their chances of beating Notre Dame than I did a week ago. A week ago, I really thought Notre Dame might win that game easily, but now I think the Buckeyes have a real shot. For them, it was good to have 3 easier games to start the season because they needed to kind of get things figured out. I think they might have. We'll see when they play Notre Dame. USC at number 8. They really haven't played anyone tough, but they've been impressive. Kind of similar to Ohio State here. Michigan at number 7. They are undefeated. They haven't really played anyone. Haven't looked great at times, but they still, you're a good team when you play as poorly as they have at times, and you still win in blowouts, even though it's bad teams. But still, Michigan has taken care of business. We'll find out now. If they struggle against Rutgers, I might drop them even lower. We'll see. That's going to be an interesting matchup coming up this Saturday. Georgia, number 6. So what do you do with Georgia? I think they showed in the second half against South Carolina what they can be and what, that they could be the number 1 team in the country. They can play like the number 1 team in the country. But if you look at the entirety of the season, it has not been there. It hasn't been consistent. I still think Georgia's probably going to go undefeated this year, and I think they probably finish number 1. But based off of what we've seen so far, slow starts, trailing by double digits against South Carolina at halftime, I mean, there's been plenty of bad for Georgia, even though you see what they're capable of when they turn it on like they did in that second half against South Carolina. But because of the inconsistency, I do not have Georgia in the top 5 still, even though I think they might, when they're playing their best, be the best team in the country. Number 5 is Washington. Impressive win again. This team continues to dominate. Michigan State obviously in a mess right now, but still to go in there and win as easily as they did. I think you can make an argument for Washington to be ranked even higher based off of what we've seen in 3 games. Notre Dame is 4-0. Easy win for them this week. Really, the NC State win is what's keeping them up in the top 4. Penn State at number 3. Didn't play their best offensively, but still won in a blowout, kind of like what I said with Michigan. Even when you don't play well, you still win in blowouts. And this was against a Power 5 opponent in Illinois, a conference game. And the West Virginia win looks even better after West Virginia just beat Pitt. So Penn State still sitting there at number 3. Texas number 2. A slow start for them, but they did take care of business late. And that's not a bad Wyoming team. Remember, they did beat Texas Tech. And the win over Alabama on the road obviously is what's keeping them at number 2. And Florida State, some people might say I should drop them based off of this performance, but there was good and bad for Florida State. Yes, the Boston College game wound up being close, but their win over LSU looks even better now because LSU looks so good, and that's really the reason why I did not drop them. Also, it was the red bandana game, emotional game at Boston College, noon kickoff. You can kind of expect some games like that. It just happens in college football, and I think every team, has there been a team that has not struggled in some way up to this point? I mean, every team has had some kind of issue in some game. It's just early in the season and teams are figuring things out. So I'm going to stick with my top 5 just like this. No real changes here. It was a crazy week this past weekend, but there wasn't a lot happening at the top. There wasn't, any big upsets like top 10 teams going down or anything like that. So those are my rankings. Would love to get your thoughts and your top 25. Let me know down in the comments below.